And welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. I'm Josh Hennig. In this week's edition, where we're going to talk about NFL free agency and the six-pack, along with some of the upcoming movie world for the DC and Marvel Universe. Also, my guest on our one-on-one conversation is going to be Cat Country 107.3 Midday host Chelsea. She is joining us because, not about country music, she's joining us to talk about comic books. She is a big-time comic book and Star Wars fan. We're talking about how women are portrayed in comic books and how that's changed over the years and how it needs to get better in certain areas. So before we get to that, here is our six-pack here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. First topic you have to get into is the NFL. The NFL has been the hottest story since the legal tampering started just days before March 14th at 4 p.m., and we've seen a lot of dominoes fall, and it's hard to get to every single little topic. But we're going to try to at least hit on the main points here. There's three major takeaway stories from the week so far. The number one takeaway story has to be the fact that the quarterback market constantly continues to produce big contracts. You look at the fact that Sam Bradford gets a one-year deal for $20 million, $15 guaranteed. Kirk Cousins getting a 3-year deal worth $84 to $86 million guaranteed from the Vikings. You look at the fact that A.J. McCarron is going to go to the Buffalo Bills. Tyrod Taylor is traded from the Bills to the Browns. Josh McCown and Teddy Bridgewater are going to be in New York with the Jets next year. Case Keenum goes to Denver. Each of these teams had specific things to fill, and they all accomplished their goals for the most part. The Vikings wanted stability at the quarterback position after having injuries the last couple of years and a lot of instability. Teddy Bridgewater was drafted to be the quarterback of the future. Then he had a horrific knee injury. They bring in Sam Bradford. The rest of the team gets injured. Bradford ends up being fine. What happened this year? Bradford gets injured this year when the team is better than it was the year before. You get a guy like Case Keenum. Almost didn't even make the roster. He had to win that backup job coming out of camp. Takes over, does a great job for the Vikings, but the Vikings are constantly non-committal with him. They won't just turn around and say, he's our guy. And as a result, Keenum walks, and it tells you where the Vikings thought about Keenum. The Vikings obviously thought Keenum wasn't the guy if they were going to pursue Kirk Cousins that hard. They obviously didn't think Bradford was the guy because Bradford is now the quarterback, or we should call it the bridge quarterback, and with the Cardinals. And how about Sam Bradford's agent? Tom Condon's got to be the greatest agent to ever live. That guy has gotten that dude so much money, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then you look at a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, maybe be the quarterback of the future for the Jets, but he's got to earn it. Josh McCown did a solid job before injuries crippled his season last year. Josh is a good locker room guy. Whether he's the starter or not, he's going to be a great teammate. We know that from his past with the Browns. I think that for the Jets, they're in a good situation because they don't have to draft a quarterback if they don't want one in the first round. They probably will because Christian Hackenberg and Bryce Petty have been that much of an abject disaster. Keenum in Denver is very interesting because the deal is only for a couple years, but it allows Denver to draft the quarterback, let him back up Keenum, and kind of see how Keenum does with the Denver offense. His skill set does with the Denver offense. He's mobile. He can throw on the run. Keenum doesn't make a lot of turnovers, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And I think that's what the Denver offense really needs at this point. By the way, Denver is going to be trading, it looks like, Trevor Siemian, their starting quarterback from last year, to be the backup in Minnesota behind Kirk Cousins. How ironic is that? Watch out for the Bills. Yes, they bring in A.J. McCarron, but they still have the assets to jump into the top 10 and not the top 5. I can't see the Bills having the ammunition to get the Giants' number 2 pick, not because the Giants won't trade their pick, because I think the Giants could trade their pick. I think that the Giants don't want to drop as far as 12th overall. I think the Giants would be more apt to listen to teams like the Broncos and the Jets, who are so close to the top 5, because I think the Giants, if they don't get Saquon Barkley, they got to go offensive line. And to me, Quentin Nelson of Notre Dame, that kid is a perfect fit for what the Giants need. He's a great guard. He's a guy who could potentially be a starter for the next 10 years in the NFL. So the Colts are maybe more interested if the Bills want to offer them a package. Maybe even the Broncos are a team that's interested. I think a lot has to do with also how the quarterbacks fall, because if the Browns take Barkley 1 and take a quarterback at 4, I think that changes the conversation on draft day. And I think a lot of these trades, they may not happen before the draft. This may be like where you saw the Bears and the Texans and the Chiefs all make trades on draft day. Another topic coming out of this week of free agency, the Philadelphia Eagles are not sitting on their hands. Howie Roseman has learned from past Super Bowl teams like the Ravens and the Giants and the Broncos. You cannot lose your key players and hope to be competitive moving forward. Howie Roseman has been working the cap. He restructured Zach Ertz. He restructured Lane Johnson. He's bringing in Haloti Ngata. He's bringing in Michael Bennett. He traded away Torrey Smith, a almost $5 million savings, to get a young cornerback who can play the slot in Darryl Worley. Yeah, they lose Patrick Robinson in the free agency, but they keep Nigel Bradham. They're probably going to lose LeGarrette Blount, but they already have Corey Clement and Jay Ajayi. The Eagles are going into 2018. They're taking the concept of being defending Super Bowl champions seriously. It's not just a moniker for them. It is a battle cry, I believe, for them. They are not taking next year lightly, and I think that's why they will not trade Nick Foles at this point, unless they're blown away by a deal, which they could be. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't see them getting blown away by a deal at this point. Nick Foles can play in the NFL, but I think that he is best suited for what the Eagles have him do. And Carson Wentz, if he's not ready, if you're not 100% sure Carson Wentz isn't ready for week 1, you got to keep Nick Foles. Because if Nick Foles starts you for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, let's say, the worst case scenario, you're coming out of that 2-2. Because this is still a very good Eagles football team, and that defense looks like it's going to get better with the additions of Ngata and Bennett. The question is, will Vinny Curry be here at the end of the day? There's a lot of conflicting reports about them restructuring a deal, possibly trying to trade him. Will they release him? And that gets me to my third point out of NFL free agency, the change of culture on different franchises. Look at the Browns. They acquired Tyrod Taylor, Jarvis Landry, Demarius Randall. They bring in the tight end, Darryl Fells. They are changing how people view the Browns. John Dorsey is taking all of this very, very seriously. The Dolphins center, Mike Pouncey, he's requested his release from Miami as of Thursday. And, of course, they've already released Ndamukong Suh. They've traded away Jarvis Landry. Again, another change of culture in Miami. Adam Gase is going to get the team that he wants out there. I mentioned the Packers with Demarius Randall. They trade for Deshaun Kaiser. It looks like Brett Hundley could be on his way out as the backup. Looks like they're going to bring in Muhammad Wilkerson and Jimmy Graham, according to reports. Jordy Nelson has been released. It looks like he's going to sign with the Raiders. A lot of movement and a lot of different culture changes in the NFL. And speaking of Jordy Nelson going to the Raiders, how about John Gruden? John Gruden is a culture change acquisition in and of himself. Teams look at the Eagles and they look at the Patriots, and they say, we have to win as a team. We can't just win at the quarterback position. And I think it's pretty obvious that after last year's NFC and AFC championship games, when Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Case Keenum are your quarterbacks, it only proves again that the quarterback position may be the most scrutinized position in the NFL, but football is still a team sport. And you can ask Dan Marino, you can ask Warren Moon, you can ask Phillip Rivers. It doesn't matter how big your stats are. If your receivers can't catch and your defense can't stop anybody, you're not going anywhere in the postseason. Topic number 2 on this week's Mutant Blitz podcast. The DC Universe movie Flashpoint officially has new directors. It's John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. Now, those two are the guys who directed Spider-Man Homecoming. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the podcast, for DC, the Flashpoint movie, which is the new Flash movie that's coming out, is going to be an opportunity for them to reshuffle the board for their movies. We've heard a lot of rumors that Ben Affleck doesn't want to keep being Batman. We've heard a lot of rumors that Zack Snyder doesn't want to keep directing movies, or at least needs a break from directing movies. We know that there's been a lot of people jumping in and out of the director's chairs, a lot of people jumping in and out of the writer's chairs. You bring over a guy from Marvel like Michael Bendis. Yes, he's a comics writer, but he also can give you ideas and thinking about how Marvel views the comic world versus the movie world. And I think DC is going to maybe use Flashpoint as a shift change. And as part of that shift change, here's what you're going to see. The directors for Flashpoint, these new directors, what John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein did with Spider-Man Homecoming was they allowed Spider-Man to enter a universe that he was not already a part of, even though he's arguably the most famous Marvel character of all time. They did it in a way that was fun. They did it in a way that was not dark. They did it in a way that allowed the Marvel Universe for him to assimilate in there without having to dominate anyone or anything. He could still stand on his own 2 feet. But they also changed how you viewed the Marvel Universe, because now you take a character in Spider-Man, you're having him start as a ground level, street level character, and you're elevating him now in the upcoming Infinity War movie to being part of the bigger picture. I think that's kind of the idea you take with the Flash. Ezra Miller's Flash in the Justice League was definitely a younger character, a younger person compared to the other people on the team. Obviously, Wonder Woman is a character that's thousands of years old. Batman is supposed to be an older Batman. Aquaman is a brash dude, but he's definitely older than the Flash. Cyborg's closer to Flash's age, but Cyborg probably is more mature and more dark than Ezra Miller's Flash is. So with Flashpoint, you get to have the whole story of him going in the past and stopping his mom from dying, coming in the future and finding out that him stopping his mom from dying changed the entire world as we know it, him dealing with the ramifications of it, and eventually having to go back in the past and undo what he did. Well, in the comics, when Flash comes back to the future, he resets things, but then he finds out that Batman is a little different. And he finds out that the world as a whole is a little different because of him resetting things. It didn't go exactly back to the way it was before. And that's the opportunity for DC to turn around and say, look, we have a new Batman. There's no more Suicide Squad. We got rid of this character. We replaced him with that character. And I think that that is the way for DC to salvage what was the Justice League failing. Was it a horrible movie? Justice League was not a horrible movie. But it definitely didn't meet expectations. It didn't have a great storyline. It was kind of just an excuse to put Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman on the screen together. I think if they would have done a pre-Justice League movie about the death and resurrection of Superman and not had it be against Steppenwolf as a supervillain and this great crescendo, and they would have made it more about Lex Luthor, you could have had an opportunity for more storytelling. But they were intent on going big or go home. Well, guess what? Now they got to go home because it didn't make as much money as they wanted it to. Flashpoint is their way of hitting the big red button, that big reset button. And for DC, they need to hit a reset button. They are so far behind Marvel right now in terms of what the Marvel Universe is doing. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but Marvel's been very successful with their movies, whereas DC, they have not been so successful. The most successful DC movies have been the Christopher Nolan movies, which were elite and excellent. The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, but they weren't part of the DC extended universe. They were outside of that whole timeline that we have going on right now. They weren't part of Man of Steel. Man of Steel is a great movie, but it was nowhere as good as Wonder Woman. Justice League, Batman v Superman, they were underwhelming. Aquaman, is it going to live up to expectations? Is it going to be able to advance the character properly? There's a lot of questions around the DC universe, and I think that Flashpoint, with these new directors, with what they did with Spider-Man Homecoming, is their way of changing course and trying to get it right moving forward. Topic number 3 this week on the Mutant Blitz podcast has to do with the NCAA selection committee. So, Oklahoma State is not, I repeat, not in the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma is, and it's just another example of how collegiate sports is about money, and it's never, ever been about the kids. Don't get it twisted. They can say to you all they want about how, oh, we care about the kids, we care about how they feel, we care about, making sure that they get an education, and no. You have to take care of the kids because it's your duty to, not because you actually care that much about them. Don't get it twisted. The NCAA is about making money. They made $1 billion in the last couple of years. College football, the NCAA tournament, big money-making opportunities. And these schools even make a lot of money off other sports too. The people who show up for UCLA and Oklahoma women's gymnastics, or the people who show up for Johns Hopkins lacrosse, or Texas baseball, or LSU baseball, these are still big money-making opportunities for these schools. The NCAA put Oklahoma in because Trae Young's in Oklahoma. And I wouldn't even minded Oklahoma being in if they didn't keep out Oklahoma State. It's a double standard. At least put Oklahoma State into the playing game instead of UCLA to play against St. Bonaventure. I would have at least stomached that because I would have understood that UCLA had an underwhelming season. Oklahoma State beat Kansas twice. They beat West Virginia. They beat Oklahoma. They beat almost everybody in their conference. and they won some games outside their conference as well. Oklahoma had a horrible run down the stretch, but they want to put Trae Young in because he brings in eyeballs, he brings in a lot of attention. He is a big name. So as a result, this is what you get. Again, these colleges, they don't care about the kids. Look at Memphis. Tubby Smith is going to be out. Penny Hardaway is going to take that job. Why? Because the attendance is down, kids are leaving the program, they can't get the recruits, they can't make the money they expect to from the program. Sports is the money-making opportunity for these universities. Because at the end of the day, these institutions of learning are businesses. They're about making a profit. How else are you going to pay for these chancellors and these presidents to be able to afford their nice suits and their nice cars and to go on their nice vacations? Those suits ain't cheap. Those vacations ain't cheap. That lifestyle isn't cheap. You can't put big money in your pocket if you don't make big money somewhere else. Whether it's off of the high tuition prices, whether it's off of the football and the basketball programs or the baseball programs, or some cases the women's gymnastics programs. This is why the NBA getting rid of the one and done is important, because it gets rid of college basketball's ability to hold something over these kids' heads. This way the kids could probably go to the G League, develop in the NBA's minor league system. Maybe the NBA can get a TV contract for the G League as a result of that. Maybe FS1 is the guy who steps up for that because they don't got an regular NBA contract right now. Maybe you can market it as the future of the NBA. There's a lot of different things you can do if you get rid of the NBA one and done. And one of them is the NCAA will finally have to bring in the question about the idea of amateurism. Like Jim Boeheim said, let the kids go out and get sponsors. Let them be able to do TV commercials. Let them be able to make some money so the universities aren't paying them, but kind of like with the Olympics, they get outside opportunities from sponsors. Again, Oklahoma is in there because of Trae Young. If Trae Young was on Oklahoma, Oklahoma State would probably be in instead of Oklahoma. Topic number 4 this week on the Mutant Blitz podcast. So as of Tuesday, March 13th, that is the date that pushed Black Panther to $1.108 billion in gross revenue, and it now sits as a 19th spot on the list of all-time highest-grossing films, passing Christopher Nolan's third and final Batman movie, giving Marvel now the top 5 highest-grossing Super Bowl movies at the box office. This shows that it's not just enough to have big-name actors and popular superheroes. Instead, this shows how important it is to have great writing along with a plan when it comes to movie-making franchises. Black Panther joins the Avengers first movie, Avengers Age of Ultron, Iron Man 3, and Captain America Civil War as the 5th highest superhero movie of all time, and more, because they could possibly rank all the way up to the top at this rate. They've also only 5 movies to cross the billion-dollar mark. This is where Marvel owns DC. This is where Marvel kicked Fox's butt. And that is, Marvel had a bigger plan. They had an end game. They had a goal with all this. Marvel wasn't just throwing actors on a screen and throwing directors out there and saying, okay, guys, make it work. Let's blow some things up. The Michael Bay strategy is getting old. It's not about how big your special effects are. People want more from their movies. Black Panther is total evidence of that. I've always said, if you take said superhero out of the movie and still wrote that story, would it still be a movie? Would it still be a good story? Black Panther doesn't need a superhero. It's still a good story. It's still great acting. At the end of the day, when you talk about the Marvel movies, you're talking about big picture planning. You're talking about setting a course for an entire franchise. That's why you can build up to Thanos. You don't have to bring out the big gun at the very beginning. Look at who Iron Man's villains were for the first 3 movies. We forget that Iron Man is basically a B-level character in the comics. Who did you have? A guy who worked for his company, his rival who teamed up with a guy who hates him, and the third movie is basically a mad scientist who uses experiments on himself. But yet, you still watched the movies, you still thought it was fun, it was great movies. Look at Captain America. Traditional story, then he has to fight his best friend, and then he has to fight Iron Man. You didn't have to put Thanos right at the beginning of the first Avengers movie. No, it was Loki. You linked the movies together. You had a interwoven connection. I mentioned earlier, if Lex Luthor would have had something to do with the Justice League movie, it would have been more streamlined. It would have been more interconnected. Instead, what did you do? You threw a villain in Steppenwolf who half the world doesn't even know who he is, and the rest of the world was wondering why he was the villain in the movie anyway. It's not enough to have big name actors. It's not enough to have big explosions on the screen. You have to give the audience more to get them coming back. You become the highest grossing movies of all time because people watch it 2, 3, 4. You look at Marvel's success. It's because somebody went and saw Avengers, and then they came back and brought their friends. And then they got the DVD. And they told everybody about the second movie. You build the anticipation from movie to movie. DC only did that with 2 of their movies in this cinematic universe. The Man of Steel was well done, and it caused anticipation for the next movie. Wonder Woman was extremely well done, created anticipation for the next movie. Batman v Superman was a letdown. Aquaman might be a letdown. Suicide Squad was definitely underwhelming, according to many people's standards. The key to a successful movie franchise, superhero or not, is, do you have a story? Does it appeal to more than just the hardcore fans? And can you get people to come back and watch it again and again? That's what Marvel has done, and that's what they're going to continue to do. And don't be surprised if Black Panther 2 might be better than Black Panther 1. I say that because I would argue that Iron Man 2 and Captain America 2 were both better than the first movies for those superheroes. Topic number 5 this week, it just kind of came in recently in the last 24 hours of me recording this podcast. So Floyd Mayweather has announced that he is going to be training with Tyron Woodley to fight in MMA and in the UFC. He confirmed it to TMZ Sports. Also, Woodley has confirmed the possibility as well. Mayweather, who I remind you, he's 41 years old. This is another opportunity for him to make money, but I think he's also a little delusional. Let me read you the quote that he told TMZ Sports. Quote, "I can wrestle. My wrestling game is not that bad." He went on to say, "On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 7 at wrestling. And I think we could take it up to 9 if possible. Of course, my hand game, 1 to 10 is 100, and my kicking game on a scale of 1 to 10 is probably a 4, unquote. Mayweather is trying to hype something up. It's unlikely that he would get McGregor in his first MMA fight just because the UFC would probably try to build it up. And the UFC really needs McGregor to fight whoever's going to be the next lightweight champion just to keep McGregor relevant in terms of the UFC title picture. One of the problems with MMA is that when guys want to come in, it's hard to get a commission to allow that first timer. Like when James Toney came to the UFC, or when CM Punk came to the UFC, or even when Brock Lesnar came to the UFC. You got to find somebody that the Athletic Commission deems a relevant matchup. For example, the New Jersey Athletic Commission said they would have never sanctioned the McGregor versus Mayweather fight. We know that when James Toney fought Randy Couture, they didn't do it in Nevada. They didn't do it in New Jersey. They didn't do it in California. The CM Punk fight, again, not in New Jersey. Not in certain states. They won't let you do it. There's a way you can bring Mayweather in and not get him embarrassed. One of them actually is CM Punk. CM Punk looks like he's going to be fighting in July in Chicago, his hometown. What if you had Punk versus Mayweather? It's kind of a super fight. It's a bit of an exhibition. But I think a commission would approve that. Another option for Mayweather is to find another older dude who he can match up with. You know, maybe it's Jason David Frank, the former Green Ranger on the Power Rangers. He has a few amateur and professional fights under his belt. You got to find somebody who is Mayweather's size, his weight class, because he's going to fight probably featherweight is probably the weight class I would expect him to be at, 145 in MMA. But again, it's all about making money. And I don't even know if Mayweather's serious or not. Obviously, the UFC wants to make another run at the Mayweather-McGregor fight. They said during the press tour that Mayweather kept saying, "Oh, I'll come to MMA next, and I'll fight you there, and I'll beat you there too." Well, if the UFC is trying to maximize their pay-per-view dollars with McGregor, why not bring Mayweather in? But I just don't think Mayweather versus McGregor 2 is going to happen immediately. I think Mayweather will probably be asked to fight somebody else first and then build to McGregor. You know, help develop the storyline so he's not just coming in dry. And that way also allows McGregor to fight somebody else too. I think the UFC would say they would target McGregor Mayweather for the UFC super event in July of 2019. That way Mayweather fights somebody this year and McGregor fights somebody this year. McGregor can fight whoever wins the next UFC lightweight title. You know, let it be, you know, champion versus champion. Let Mayweather fight somebody who is very low on the rung but has a big enough name to make it at least a sellable fight. And you put Mayweather and McGregor on the same card. That way, after the fight, you can have them start yelling at each other and building the storyline to sell it for 2019. That's how you do it. Do I want to see it happen? No, because I don't think Mayweather is going to survive in an MMA fight against McGregor. McGregor will destroy him. McGregor as an MMA fighter is what Mayweather is in some ways to boxing. Not that McGregor's the greatest fighter of all time. McGregor has shown you that in MMA, he can knock people out. McGregor has shown you that his grappling game is much better than people give him credit for, even though he's not a grappler by nature, by trade. Mayweather has shown you he is a boxer his entire life. And he can tell you how much good his wrestling is, but it's a whole different story when you try to wrestle with MMA guys who have been training this for years and years. It's the same argument from MMA to boxing. The reason why we don't say MMA fighters can be successful in boxing is because they've not been training boxing their whole life. It's the same thing with a boxer coming to MMA. You saw what happened to James Toney. You saw what happened to CM Punk. These guys just don't have the years of experience to be that successful in the octagon. I don't think Mayweather's going to be much different. He'll make it interesting, and they'll probably give him an opponent that he can beat just so they can build up to another McGregor-Mayweather fight in the octagon. Let's be realistic. Mayweather's a boxer entering a world that he's never fought in before. Our final topic this week on the Mutant Blitz podcast has to do with Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is where Marvel has come up short, and that is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. used to be, the original purpose was to fill the gaps between the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies and bridge elements for each of the next films. Well, on Friday, March 9th, marked the 100th episode of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which showcased the quote-unquote return of famous villains. Basically what happened is there was an incident that caused what they called a fear dimension, and all of their greatest fears came to life. So it was return of some LMDs. It was a return of, different villains who had, haunted them. And they were just figments of their imagination. They eventually conquered it and they were able to move on. This is just another example of how the show has drifted away from the original intent. In some ways, it's gotten more corny and less grounded to be really part of the Marvel universe as a whole. And the fact that they really don't have any crossovers anymore. You saw Lady Sif come on to the show early on. You saw that there was a reason why Phil Coulson was the head of the program, because the idea was Phil would eventually go back to the Marvel movie universe. The idea was you have a character like Quake, because in the comics, she was a major part of different story arcs in Marvel Comics in the 2000s. You had Samuel L. Jackson make appearances on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You had all these things, but now it's become more and more independent, and with the time travel and dealing with the Kree and the future and the Inhumans, the show Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has become more of a proxy to, have some little fun for maybe the writers and the creators at Marvel, more so than having it being part of the universe. I don't know what the long-term future is for that show, but I don't think it's going to be more than a couple more years. Because one, it looks like they might be killing off Phil Coulson. He's a major part of the show. Two, I think that there's only so long you can have these people not run into the other superheroes. You're expanding the Marvel Universe. You got 4 major superheroes in New York City now, aside from Spider-Man. Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and Iron Fist, because the Netflix show. And we've already confirmed that they're part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How can they not at some point run into Steve Rogers or Bucky Barnes? You have Black Panther now. You have Doctor Strange. You have all these different people out there. It's not like you have a handful of superheroes anymore. And if Marvel absorbs and buys up the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, you have even more people. It's going to become less and less likely you can avoid running into different people at some point. Or at least somebody like Iron Man or somebody like Doctor Strange or Black Panther, or somebody doesn't look around and be like, I wonder what's happening over there. Let's go check it out. Who are you guys? I thought you were dead. There was never that conversation that's happening. And I think if you keep pretending like they're separate from each other, it's going to not work. And so unless they start implementing some of the movie stuff into the TV show, I think a TV show is eventually going to run its course, because it's definitely done an interesting and fun job at introducing different elements like Ghost Rider and the Kree, along with time travel. But if it's not really part of the bigger picture, then you're pretty much wasting everybody's time. All right, coming up next is my one-on-one conversation with Chelsea from Cat Country 107.3 FM. We're going to hear from her about women in comics, how they're being portrayed in the movies and TV shows, and kind of get her perspective on the Marvel and DC universe as a whole. Coming up next on the Mutant Blitz podcast. And welcome to this week's one-on-one conversation. I'm going to be joined by Cat Country 107.3's own Midday host Chelsea. She's more than just a girl on the radio. She also reads comics, watches the movies, in the Star Wars. So who better to have on a week after International Women's Day to talk about female superheroes than Chelsea? How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. So before we dive into any specifics, kind of just give people out there kind of like an idea of like how long you've been in the comics, stuff like that.
I would say I was definitely I jumped on the bandwagon a bit. It was definitely a bandwagon jump when it became very popular in culture, in pop culture, to go see superhero movies. So I kind of jumped on the bandwagon then, but I definitely dived in head first and got into anything related comic book wise. And then what most people would say, you have to be a super nerd to of being Doctor Who oriented. So I really just dove into the deep end and kind of stayed there now for the past couple of years. But I will admit, it's a bandwagon jump. I get it. I know. I'm not claiming to be, I was a fan before. No, I wasn't. I know.
but the thing is, you understood that and you embraced it. You were like, listen, I know what I know and I know what I don't know.
Exactly.
And then you were like, what I want to know about, I'm going to find out about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I've attached myself to certain characters that I like more than others. And not only just I'm a Google fanatic of just Googling anything I can and finding out all this as much information as possible and watching and reading and doing all of that. So,
well, that's also because people like you and me, we come from the good old days where we actually used to go to the library and look things up. Kids today have all their smartphones and everything.
I know. It's definitely makes it easier for them. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the things that stood out to me is the last few weeks, Black Panther now is one of the 19th highest grossing movies of all time.
So good.
And is now the 5th largest Marvel film. It's one of 5 Marvel films that make the $1 billion. And I thought it was interesting because, to me, the movie that should have been in that conversation was Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Because Wonder Woman was so well done. Gal Gadot embraced that role. And one of the great things about Wonder Woman is that she's not a copy of another character.
No,
it's not like Batgirl
all.
or Supergirl or even in Marvel, where there's there's 20 different Spider Girls.
There's a lot. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that was what was cool about Wonder Woman. And what's cool about Wonder Woman is it isn't the male counterpart to something. And I actually really quickly want to touch on what you just said about Black Panther. What I loved about Black Panther is not only was it a great movie to represent African Americans in a different light and in a very positive light, but also everybody, all his military and his general were all women. Mm-hmm. So it balanced out both parties here of people that are very much underrepresented in movies and represented usually not as good as we want them to be, and they balance out having both. So that, I just wanted to put that in there real quick. But back to Wonder Woman, that was what's so cool. You said it's not a male counterpart of a superhero. It's not like, all right, well, we'll just do Hulk. Well, we'll just do She-Hulk because we need a female character.
Right.
She is her own identity and she is her own character and she's her own woman, and that makes her so much more special than a lot of the other female superheroes, because most of the female superheroes out there are just ripoffs of their male counterpart, and it's kind of frustrating.
I think it's also frustrating, and I'm coming as a male viewer, because it's it feels like it's lazy.
It is lazy. It is very lazy. They don't put any kind of backstory, because they kind of just copy backstories and copy everything, and it's not creative whatsoever. And what's cool about the comic world is that you can be as creative as you want. There is no limit. You don't have to rationalize anything you do. You could legitimately make up a whole new world and then in the next series completely destroyed it and it never happened again. And you could erase your mistakes like they never happened, and people have accepted it. And that's what's so cool about the comic book world. It takes this fantasy to a whole new level. So they aren't limited to ideas. You come up with the most outrageous ideas you want, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you just pretend it never happened.
Right.
So there's no reason why they couldn't in the past have characters of women characters that aren't just complete carbon copies of their male counterpart and just add Miss or girl or woman. I'm like, no, you could be a little bit more creative than that.
And to me that's the parallel for Black Panther and Wonder Woman. Black Panther was never a copy of anybody else.
No.
Black Panther stood on his own 2 feet. And to me, if you take Black Panther and Wonder Woman out of their movies, it's still a good movie.
Yes.
It's still a story. And to me, that's the difference from what these other movies are doing. And I feel like Wonder Woman just didn't get enough attention because it wasn't a Marvel movie. And it did us somewhat of a disservice because, like I said, Gal Gadot and the whole cast and the director and everybody involved with that movie deserves more than 2 thumbs up because they presented a superhero who is a woman, but you didn't look at her like a woman. You looked at her like a superhero. And to me, that's the biggest thing when it comes to superheroes and women. That is, you stop looking at them as you're a male, you're a female, or you're black and you're white. You just look at them as you are a superhero and you're someone that, whether we like it or not, kids are going to look up to.
What was cool, well, Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman, definitely did not get the nod that she should have because, I mean, she directed a fantastic movie. And a movie, even if it wasn't a superhero movie, like you said, was a good movie. And I agree. If it was a Marvel movie, it would have been a very different story. It would have been a completely different story as the reception it got and the way people reacted to it. It definitely, unfortunately, being a DC movie, because DC has such a not great track record, it didn't do as well as it should have. But what's cool about Wonder Woman, and I like that they said it in World War II, because you got to see the stark difference between her attitude and the way society viewed women at that time. But what's cool about Wonder Woman and the way they approached Wonder Woman, it wasn't in-your-face feminism saying, I'm going to do this because I'm a woman and I'm going to prove you wrong. Because I'm not going to lie, as a woman, I find that mildly annoying sometimes. Wonder Woman did it because, well, why can't I do it? And she never took it as, oh, I'm doing this because I'm a woman. She did everything she did and the way she acted because that's how she was raised. And being a woman was just a sidebar of it. It didn't matter that, she was doing any of the things that she did and protecting and saving cities at that point, and, during the war and helping people out and getting involved in a war, and especially in a very male dominant time. But she didn't look at it as, I'm going to prove you wrong because I'm a woman. I'm going to do this, and I just happen to be a woman on the side. And it wasn't in your face feminism, as I'm going to call it. It was really well done in that way. And I think that's a better message to show women. Isn't that, oh, we're going to prove them wrong because they think less of you because you're a woman. No, you're going to do it and going to prove to them you as a person can do it. And then it just happens to be that you're a woman as well. And I think that was a good message that they put into Wonder Woman.
And that's one of the few things DC gets right is Wonder Woman to me, because of the fact that she is part of what we call the Trinity of DC. It's Superman, it's Batman, and it's Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman is arguably one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe.
Absolutely.
She just happens to be a woman. And I think that's where DC gets it right. But on the flip side, this is where DC gets it wrong. Because you have Catwoman and you have Batgirl. And speaking of Supergirl, the thing that drives me nuts about that show, and half the reason why I watch it, because they do so many crossovers at this point, you kind of have to watch it just to know, all right, well, she does cross over with the Flash. Mm-hmm. I'm not totally confused. And this is slightly politically incorrect.
That's okay.
I hate the fact that every female on that show is, for lack of a better term, really skinny.
That's true.
To me, it's offensive because of the fact that we live in a society where everyone is being told how you're supposed to look. Mm-hmm. And if you don't look a certain way, you're not attractive, you're not pretty, you're not cool, you don't fit in. And when you have a show that's supposed to be for women, which is what they say a Supergirl is supposed to be, why is every girl on the show not there? There is more skinny women in TV shows and movies than I've ever met in my entire life.
That's so true. That is true. And I honestly, I've never looked at it that way. And it is an interesting point that you bring up. And they all the women kind of look very similar on Supergirl. They all kind of follow into this one mold. And I won't lie, I do watch Flash and Arrow, but I actually never got into Supergirl.
I don't blame you.
I tried to, when it first came out on, what was it, ABC had it? CBS had it. And I fell asleep during the first episode. And that to me was, I'm not gonna do this. I can't do this. So I've only seen her in crossover episodes. So I've never actually watched the show. So I can't comment too much on the show, but from what I've seen, understand where you're coming from. They are kind of just the same person, just carbon copied.
But that kind of proves my point, though, and that is this show is supposed to be for women.
Yeah.
And you as a woman, you were just like, snooze, I can't do this. And if you're writing a story, you're anything, it doesn't have to be superheroes. If it's something for a specific demographic, you can't give them a reason to change the channel.
It's true. I thought she was just too cutesy. I think that was a thing of it. Like, she just didn't seem believable to me. And I just found her to be just a little bit cutesy would be the word, and it's an awful word to use, but I didn't find her to be a strong woman as a character.
Which is she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
There's actually a time in DC Comics where Supergirl is more powerful than Superman.
Yeah.
And if you go back to all the drawing of her from the 70s and 80s and the late 90s, she is not a skinny girl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she doesn't look like a bodybuilder, obviously, but I mean, she looks like she could, like, you know, if the actress would go to the gym, let's say.
Yeah.
You know,
she could take you down.
Right. And she doesn't, it's not so surprising that she could take you down.
Yeah.
Like, you look at her and be like, all right, I get it. You are Supergirl. Whereas I feel like a lot of these characters, not just Supergirl, the TV show, it's for you mentioned Arrow.
Mm-hmm.
The actress who plays Thea Queen, the actress who plays Laura Lance, the actress who plays Sarah Lance. To me, it's a bad message to women that every superhero or every big-time woman are all of these stick figures. And I think that's offensive because you're basically continuing the same bad message to society, and that is, if you don't look this way, you are not fitting our mold of attractive, which is absolutely 110% wrong.
Yeah.
Because one, not everybody fits the same mold. It's just biologically impossible. And two, if you are making this so it's supposed to be, because they're all obviously attractive women.
Yeah.
All right. There's not like there's some like girl you're like, oh, okay, where'd you come from? You know, there's nothing like that. So for the superficial people, there's people who don't like skinny women.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're putting a bad message out to women, and then you're also offending an entire group of people who are superficial, who for them, again, you don't give people a reason to turn something off.
And it was I turned it off. But what's funny is you mentioned that because, and it's not saying that you need them to be super curvy, but like they don't even have like any kind of muscle on them.
Right,
and for characters that are supposed to be, you know, like being able to take somebody down and do all this stuff, at least look a little bit muscular.
I mean,
isn't
Sarah Lance
asking
is
a
supposed
lot.
to be an assassin.
Yeah, which is funny because now Gal Gadot is not I would never call her a curvy girl. She's skinny. However, what was cool about her is that they wanted to CGI her thighs so they didn't jiggle. And she said, absolutely not. That's absurd, which is so absurd. Now that I know that that's a thing that they can make it look like women's thighs aren't jiggling on TV and movies is just absurd to me. That's just outrageous. And she's like, no, that's just disgustingly ridiculous. And I'm not letting you do that. Yes, did they have to add CGI to her because she was pregnant? Yes, that's a different story.
But they did the same thing with Scarlett Johansson.
Yes, you gotta take out the pregnant belly. It would have been weird if they had Wonder Woman pregnant. I get it. Understandable. But to take out thigh jiggle, that's just crazy to me. So I like that Gal Gadot said, no, you know what? This is natural. This is what happens. People's thighs jiggle, and you're going to leave it in. And I was like, thank you, Gal Gadot. I don't feel so bad about my thigh jiggle anymore.
But they did the same thing for Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
They CGI'd her belly, but they kept everything else.
Yes. I agree. Oh, my God. I never thought of a lot of the characters, especially on CW, how thin and not even any muscle on them. That's what's so scary about it. There's no muscle, and they're beating people up.
Right.
Makes no sense.
It makes it less believable.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the things I enjoy about putting superheroes on the big screen and small screen is that it makes them more attainable per se. Not literally like we're going to be a superhero one day, but it makes you feel like I can identify with this character more. Because the thing is, when I was a kid, I read comics. As a kid, your imagination could be more wild. As you get older, you realize what reality is like. You understand what the real world is and isn't. So for adults, the movies and TV shows are comic books now.
Yeah, it's very true. And because they create their own universes within the movies and TV shows now, they flat out will say, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is not the comic books. And they have said that multiple times. Are they taking general ideas from the comics, but they are not the same. They are now a pretty much different world than the comics, and to keep them separate. And I like that they did that because it also helps. It really did help with getting any backlash from comic book readers. They're like, no, well, that doesn't happen. But nope, it's fine. It's like if you read one of the biggest Marvel movies with Civil War, you read the comic book. There is nothing similar about that movie and the comic whatsoever. They are far different. But they were like, you know what? But they're different. And I like that they've done that, but they do make it more attainable, and having strong female characters on TV and on movies is really important for young women. And I always say that when people will say, well, stop making Wonder Woman more than what it was. It was a movie. It's not a woman thing. No, it is. And just because it doesn't mean that to you doesn't mean it can't mean that for a little girl or a woman watching this and saying and feeling empowered. There's nothing wrong with feeling empowered by a movie. And that bothered me so much when a lot of people say, oh, it's just a movie. People are making too much out of it. No, they're not. It is important. And having these characters on TV and in movies is really important for girls growing up to see people that are as powerful as all the male characters as well.
Speaking of a lead female, how do you feel about Brie Larson being Captain Marvel?
I don't know yet. She's a great actress. So, it's so funny is that when people get cast, I never want to judge by the casting because people have been cast throughout the years and immediately you're like, this is going to be awful. And then it works.
Right.
And you're like, oh, okay. You know what? You know what you're doing. You get paid to cast. I don't. So I'm not going to say anything until I see her in the movie.
I personally like it. Because to me, Captain Marvel was always a younger character anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She was never an older character in general. And I think Brie Larson, because of her youthful looks, I think it matches what they want to do with the character. And for those who don't know, Captain Marvel is, for lack of a better term, a silly, powerful character in the comics. She's basically Superman with hand blasters. Okay?
Accurate. Accurate.
So, to me, I think it's going to be a fun movie. But again, like you said, Marvel, they seem to know what they're doing. So
that's what I'm saying. I don't get paid to do it. They do. So we'll see what happens when the movie comes out.
Chelsea, one more thing before I let you go, and I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Just give me an overall idea of what you think of where the comic book, TV, and movie world is right now, like where we are in 2018. Because obviously, listen, it's been 10 years, actually almost 11 years now since Iron Man came out.
I'm excited because now this is going to be starting there. A lot of those actors, their contracts are going to be up soon or within the next movie or two. So now we're going to have this whole new phase of superheroes. And so far they are going down the path of taking lesser known characters, which is really cool that Marvel has done. They have become professionals at taking the characters that in comics weren't great characters or people didn't care about as much. They were like the B list of the superheroes and
like
making them A list. Yeah, and making them A list. So I think that's amazing. But they are trending towards a path of taking different characters of different cultures and different genders and making them in the forefront. And I think that's important, especially in today's society, to have these types of characters making these movies and making this money in movies and being these big blockbusters. So I think Marvel has definitely taken that into consideration with the movies that they're lining up. They're making sure that they are keeping as much diversity as possible and they are keeping, different characters of both male and female in the forefront. So I think that so far, it looks like they're on the right path and I hope they continue that and continue that trend upward and not, fall back. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed.
I was just going to say, you mentioned BC level. What DC mixes up is now Black Lightning's on TV. So
yeah, that's happening. Is that on yet? Is that start
It's
yet?
been on. I've been watching it.
I'm clearly very behind on TV shows. I'm very, very, very behind on TV shows.
Here's my explanation. Did you watch Luke Cage?
Yes.
Okay. This is DC's over... They're trying too hard to be Luke Cage.
Oh, that's a problem.
They're trying way too hard.
Okay, fair enough. I'm in the middle of Jessica Jones now, speaking of Netflix shows and women superheroes. I'm in the middle of Jessica Jones right now. I love her. I want to be her.
Such an awesome job.
Well, that's a casting one that I looked at when she first got cast and thinking, this is going to be terrible. I don't like anything this girl has ever been in. And then she's Jessica Jones, and I'm like, I'm in love with you. You're the best person I've ever seen on TV in my entire life. So that's why I won't judge casting until it happens.
Chelsea, I really appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Thanks again to Chelsea for coming on the Mutant Blitz podcast. Hope you all enjoyed the podcast this week. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment below what you thought of the podcast this week. Be sure to stay tuned every week as we bring you the six-pack and a one-on-one conversation. I'm Josh Hennig, and thanks for listening to the Mutant Blitz podcast. Have a great week, everybody.